Welcome back to another edition of the Edge Podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge writers Ryan Harlan and TJ Mathewson. We're coming to you guys following Oregon State's 38-15 win over Idaho State. We're also going to be looking ahead to the matchup against San Diego State on the road this weekend. Thanks for tuning into this edition of the podcast. Fellas, how are things?
Good. It is good to get back in the swing of things.
Yes,
It's good to
sir.
see some real football being played.
Absolutely. It's another week in the books, another week to go. Season taking it week by week. Can't complain. Football is officially back.
Yeah, it's true. And, we got NFL kicking off this weekend, and myself, I'm very excited about fantasy this year as we'll all be duking it out in our own league this year, which I'm pretty excited for. But nevertheless, Oregon State and college, TJ, they college football got underway really this last weekend, and Oregon State gets the victory at Reser Stadium, starts the season 1-0. Not the game we expected by any stretch of the imagination, and Ryan and I kind of talked about it in our post-game breakdown over at Beavers Edge from Reser on Saturday night. But nevertheless, a win is a win, and you hear that cliche all the time that teams make the biggest adjustments from week 1 to week 2, and I think we're going to see that on full display as they go in to play a San Diego State team that is not quite the level we've seen the last decade or so. They're down a little bit compared to what we've seen, but nevertheless will be a step up in competition compared to what we saw with Idaho State this last weekend. So we'll obviously get in to the Aztecs and that matchup coming up shortly, but just want to get your guys' thoughts on that Idaho State game. A bit of a kind of sleepy game at Reser, I would say, for an afternoon game. I actually mentioned with Ryan, it felt like, just the vibes and the energy, to me, it almost felt like a 11 a.m. or noon game. And then, I felt like the Beaver fans kind of woke up when things got a little bit, tight. And then obviously they ended up winning comfortably. Didn't turn out to be, a dogfight like somebody was dealing with down the road with another Idaho team. So we didn't take it to the final stretch, but nevertheless, I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts were overall just from this matchup before we kind of dive into the weird offense and some interesting defense as well. So let's start with you, TJ. Just overall thoughts from game day.
I would say I was intrigued, not impressed.
Fair.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's how I put it. I want to be blown away a little bit more for a season that is so dependent on what kind of impression you leave with the general public. And for most of us media, we are general public. We're trying to look at things more objectively. Do you pass the eye test? Do you look good? And we saw some good things. We saw a rushing offense that looked really solid. We saw, if you look at the box score, the run blocking was good. The fact that you could balance two running backs and then you could pull on Saladin Allah in the final moments of the game if you need an extra burst and you have a fresh caliber running back ready to go. So you like those things. What I tried to lay it out before the game that I had like a checklist of things I wanted to see. And as we've spent a lot of time talking about, the passing offense for the Beavers is a concern. I'm like, well, this is an opponent you'd want to get some of those wrinkles out of, so you have something on film to work with for week 2 when you go on the road to San Diego State. Problem is they threw the ball 14 times, so we can't make a real assessment on how the passing game was. Giovanni McCoy's pass to David Wells was excellent, perfectly placed ball. It's better than anything we saw in the fall. Right between the two defenders. Wells ran right under it, ran into the end zone for a touchdown. There's a couple of underthrown balls too. But when you only throw 10 passes as a quarterback,
right,
evaluating that is difficult because you need volume. So here's what we can evaluate. They were efficient. They took care of business. It could have been more lopsided. You were that much more of a better team, but they made some mistakes. They turned the ball over. They had some bad penalties. That didn't help out as well. But regardless, they got a win. And that's really the most important thing. And the strength of your team was reaffirmed, which was the offensive line and the running game.
Yeah. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Similar to TJ's, was more of some good, some areas for improvement. I think we really won't know what the passing game will look like until this weekend, because just the lack of throws from both quarterbacks, from Jabari and Giovanni. I mean, yeah, 9 of 10 in the box score,
Yeah.
that looks good, right? But at the same time, I kind of pointed out in one of my takeaways that a couple of his passes could have gone the other way, and you're looking at a different story there. But took care of the ball, didn't put it into harm's way, and I mean, your strength of the offense this year was going to be that rushing attack. That was reaffirmed again, and credit also to Gunderson for sticking to it and being like, hey, this is working. Why go away from it until they can stop it, and until we need to open up the playbook and dial up that 55-yard touchdown pass. So there's some good things, and some things I think we'll see kind of flesh themselves out this weekend. But overall, if I had to put like a letter grade on what I saw, probably a B plus, if being a little maybe a little optimistic there, but just kind of middle of the road. Not bad for a first game, but it could have been certainly a lot better.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the offensively, like you guys nailed it. I mean, obviously the run pass splits what they were, you do the math, about 69-70% of the time, Oregon State is running the ball. And again, very situational, but something that I was mentioning to Ryan, TJ, when he and I were texting about this a little bit, was like, we talked a lot about what was Ryan Gunderson going to do when he was a coordinator, right? He had deep roots with Brent Brennan, who we see now successful at Arizona, and deep roots with Chip Kelly, which, obviously one of the great spread offense innovators, and then deep roots with Mike Riley from his playing time, the pro style aspect. So I think you get all those things kind of encapsulating into who Ryan Gunderson is. But I think this particular game, you saw the true, and I know it's a poor timed reference, but I think you really got to go back to like those early Chip Kelly teams at Oregon in like the 2009, 2010, 2011, when they would run the ball 65-70% of the time and only pass when it was kind of necessary. They perfected the spread run. Now, I'm not saying that's what Oregon State's going to do, but you look at a game like this where it's like, hey, Gundy's cool with calling run plays 70% of the time. That's the little bit of that Chip Kelly kind of background, I think. And then I think you also look at it from like situational. So I think it's a little bit of both. Because if Idaho State had a team that was stopping Oregon State for less yards per carry, I mean, they averaged 6.5 yards a carry. If it was maybe 3.5 yards a carry, probably a different story. But I think it's just kind of interesting to kind of start just kind of taking mental notes of how Ryan Gunderson calls games, and then we can kind of look back and be like, well, that game was kind of more from his Chip Kelly roots. Maybe we see a Beaver take more snaps under center at quarterback, and then you're seeing more of the pro style Mike Riley influence too. So I think we're just learning. We're going to learn Ryan Gunderson being a coordinator, and that's always fascinating for a first-time coordinator, because you're piecing together, whether you're, Steve Sarkisian leaving Alabama, and it's like, oh, he's added a whole page of the Nick Saban brain trust to what he does. So I think these coaches kind of pick things up, and that's where I think it's going to be fascinating to watch Gundy. But with this, guys, and specifically with Gundy, you guys caught up with him earlier this week. What do you think the level is in McCoy to pass if necessary? Because if I'm San Diego State and Sean Lewis, and we'll get into this more a little bit later, you're selling out to stop the run against Oregon State and saying, hey, beat us through the air. What do you think the confidence level is in McCoy and these receivers? Sounds like the Beavers will get Darius Clemens to make his debut this weekend. We'll see how that goes, but that'll obviously help out the receiver room a little bit. But just what are your guys' thoughts on that as we kind of approach with the passing matchup?
They sound pretty confident in him, even with the low volume. They wanted to pass him more in the game. It just didn't work out that way. But if they had to, it sounded like they were going to. If it was 60 run, 40 pass, 55 run, 45 pass, if they had to do that, it sounded like they were comfortable. I personally think when they came back out in the third quarter and they had some adjustments to make and they were a little bit more aggressive on offense, they threw the ball a little bit more in that third quarter. I thought they looked their best offensively when that was happening.
Yeah.
I thought that allowed them to be the most explosive version of themselves that they could have. So I would imagine they're seeing the same thing I am. They're sitting in the same box I am. And they see these guys practicing all week, and
Right.
they wouldn't have named Giovanni the starter if they weren't confident he could pass the football. I would say they didn't run. I don't get the impression they're running the offense because they don't want him to pass the football. I think he's going to have to pass the football more this week because
for sure.
they're going to have a more experienced quarterback in San Diego State. San Diego State's going to try and hold the football, run it a lot with Marquez Cooper.
Right.
So how do you offset that? You got to lean on your quarterback. That's where you could have an advantage in this. I will say the other thing too. It's nice to see Jabari get in there. We're literally the Aiden Childs script from last year, third drive of the game. Put him in there. He made that one throw on the sideline, like a 25-yard comeback route, and just let it rip. Ooh. You just sort of hear it just slicing right through the air.
Yeah. I mean,
but at least Bray kind of came out and said it after the game, being like, "Hey, we're high on him. We think he gives the defense something else to look at out there, and the plan is to continue having him, do that." The other guy never really said that a whole lot,
right.
either.
No,
so, but good to see Bray kind of just say it right off the bat, and we know what to expect going forward.
And honestly, and you guys bring up a point, we'll go ahead and do a quick pause where we are in the Edge podcast, and we'll do a round, because you mentioned it, Ryan. The other guy and the other guy over there in East Lansing, kind of a rough debut this last weekend too. So I'm sure no Beaver fans were upset that was a bit of a rough day. And then Florida State's 0-2. So just gonna throw that out there. I don't know if anyone else caught that game against Boston College, but rough play under center. I'll just leave it at that. Not. It certainly wasn't 9 and 10 for 114
Not a good day
yards.
for the 2023 quarterback room. That's for sure.
Yep.
And Ben didn't play, so
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's just a blank slate.
Yeah, it's just but yes, we can unpause. But yes, I had to make mention of that because it's like you guys remember it's like Beaver fans, you guys remember the episode of The Office where Ryan Howard's taking his notes, and I imagine Beaver fans are like, okay, Michigan State struggle week 1, Florida State 0-2, just taking their little notes. And
at least Charles has he's 18 years old excuse, which still counts.
This is true. This is true. But yeah. So anyway, that's all I'm going to dedicate on the podcast to talking about The Departed. But when you guys mentioned that, I just had to mention it. But no, back to the Beavs. You look at, obviously Salahadin Halal was an awesome revelation late in the game. 8.4 yards per carry, excuse me. Only 7 carries, but he looked really good. And that was something we talked about in fall camp, guys. He was coming and pushing Jake Reichel for that 3rd spot. Obviously, they bring different skill sets, and I think there still could be moments for Jake Reichel. But as far as a true 1, 2, 3, I think he's past him in the rotation. And, it's like, I know he was listed above him on the depth chart, but it's like he's going to probably be that 3rd guy to get snaps. And then in front of him, you talk about 44 combined attempts and, nearly 220 yards almost 300 yards of, rushing between Anthony Hankerson and Jam Griffin. Just an impressive day for those two. I mean, talking 8 yards a carry for Jam, long run of 22, 2 touchdowns, 155 yards for Hank, 6.5 yards, and both those guys, like we talked about at all fall camp, looked 1A, 1B, and, now they run for, over 300 yards, and that's a really impressive stat. Even against Idaho State, regardless of who that is, that's an impressive stat to have.
Do you guys think there's a chance this running back room shakes out like the 2022 one? 2022 one did. Damian started as the 3rd back behind Jam and behind Deshaun Fenwick. I do think this room's a little bit better, and the top 2 are a little bit more, I'd say, balanced and explosive, as opposed to like Fenwick. I know Fenwick was either a yes or a no for most fans instead of a universal yes, and Damian, of course, is down at Miami now for good reason, because he's a very talented, very good player who will play on Sundays next year. But Do you think he's got a chance to shoot up that? Is he going to get enough opportunity to do that?
Yeah, I mean, based on what I've seen, I think they are probably going to like they seem to really like Hank and Griffin, but I think Saladin is going to get more and more carries each week. I really do. I mean, he not to say that he, you know, because it's funny because I really liked Cornell Hatcher in the fall too, the other freshman running back, but it was Saladin who was just a little bit better. And then as now we got into the season, like I want to see Saladin take some carries against a non-FCS school, kind of see how, because again, you're still regardless, an 18-year-old true freshman. Maybe he's 19. I don't know exactly his age, but you know what I mean. He's still a true freshman out there. And like TJ said, it took Damian Martinez, and you know, I think they're very. I don't think that Saladin Law is quite the. Damian Martinez came in and was physically like ready to take a pounding as an 18-year-old. I don't know if Saladin is ready for quite that. Yeah, you kind of get what I'm getting at, Ryan, a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of get what you're, going towards a little bit there. I think just more the physical tools, maybe a
Yeah,
little bit different between the two. But talking to Gundy earlier this week, the goal is to get him more involved
yeah,
and in the run game and not try to, put the whole entire workload on both Hank and Jam. Try to keep them fresh throughout the season. But I think my biggest thing from Gunderson now as a play caller, I want on that topic is just seeing how he goes beyond those scripted plays. Though that's I think my biggest thing now. I'm looking for is just seeing how he improves as a play caller, going beyond those scripted, whatever, like 15 plays or so, and just being able to be like, okay, these aren't working. What do you go to
right,
next? Like that's
right.
my, kind of biggest thing there. But yeah, for Saladin, like I think he's gonna get more of a workload as the season progresses. It's just more of, I think he'll make the strides necessary in order to have that towards the end of the season. And it's just bringing him along slowly
Right.
as a freshman. So
Right. Right. And I think, other things to like offensively as we kind of wrap up the offensive side. I mean, you only had five penalties, 59 yards. I mean, Bray mentioned a couple of those they'd like to get cleaned up, but not too bad as far as penalties go. You had the one fumble that Jam lost early in the game. Other than that, we're able to mostly hang on the ball, keep the turnover battle one in your favor. Receivers, we'll kind of see. Obviously, we saw, I think Trent Walker impressed after, not having a super big role. David Wells is clearly coming on after that catch. His ability to kind of run under that ball and be able to get to it, super impressive. But yeah, I'm curious to see what happens when Darius Clemens most likely rejoins the room and kind of makes his debut because, you talk about star power, that guy's got it, right? I mean, no disrespect to the other guys in the room, but they were, 2 and 3-star recruits and solid players, but Darius Clemens was one of the top receivers in his class. And I think he has that X level ability and can kind of really take the lid off of defenses just with his physical tools. So I'm very curious to see when he gets into the mix. Defensively, guys, it kind of a similar kind of odd vibe. Only allowed 15 points when it was all said and done, and really it was 13 minus the safety, which wasn't really their fault, obviously. And with the defense, I mentioned you guys, it looked like they took a quarter to figure out kind of Idaho State's passing attack. I think as I mentioned, they allowed 100 passing yards first quarter, and then 120 something like that for the rest of the 3 quarters. So got that dialed in, and from that perspective, I think it was the second half, and I remember mentioning to you, Ryan, a play that wasn't a sack, but where Nico Taylor just laid out their quarterback on he was rolling out and just kind of decked him. And it really seemed to like wake up the whole defense. And then from there, you saw a little bit more, here in the pads a little bit, and guys were hitting a little bit harder. And, I do distinctly remember in the second half, there were a few kind of oohs and ahs where the Beavers were kind of delivering some big hits. And I think that kind of helped kind of set the tone a little bit more defensively in the second half. Like, hey, we're bigger than you, we're stronger than you, we're more physical than you. You're going to feel it more in the second half. And then our talent's going to win out. You saw, I believe, Jaden Robinson had a couple breakups. Noble Thomas was all over the place. He laid the lumber a couple times from the nickelback position in the second half. So first half, not a whole lot to be like thrilled about, kind of an okay performance. Felt a lot better in the second half. Generally speaking, I'd like to see more of a pass rush. and especially going into this weekend, you've got a true freshman at San Diego State and Danny O'Neal. Made his first career start against an FCS team in Texas A&M Commerce. I'm not super familiar with the Lions, but I imagine they're on the lower rung of FCS, just considering that I think they're pretty new to the FCS level. So all that being said, O'Neal will have a much tougher task this weekend, but, four-star, if I believe, pretty talented kid coming out of high school that went to play for Sean Lewis's offense. So, what were your guys' general thoughts on the defense, and how do you think that will translate against the Aztecs this weekend? TJ, you obviously mentioned, I'm blanking on his name right now, the running back from San Diego State, who is one of the more just accomplished guys in in college football after starting his career at Kent State with Sean Lewis, having a couple 1,000-yard seasons there, going over to Ball State, and then now to San Diego State. Marquez Cooper, excuse me. I knew it would come to me eventually. But yeah, it just, I think they will lean on that ground game and probably try to make life easy on O'Neal. But, what'd you guys see from the defense, starting with you, TJ, on Saturday?
Well, Thomas Collins is the big standout. It's the number's been thrown out there all week. He led the country in pressures this week, especially rushing from the interior. And I've said multiple times, there's really no more valuable form of defense than a strong interior pass rush. So that's a good sign, but you're not going to be playing an FCS offensive line this week. You're going to be playing an FBS offensive line. So these guys are going to be bigger. It's going to be tougher. And this is going to be, the first litmus test in terms of tackling this season. The tackling on the defense last year with some of these same guys on the defense from last year just flat out couldn't tackle. This would be a game where Marquez Cooper would break 15 tackles and run for 200 yards, right? So are they gonna be able to keep him from doing that? Because if he's running up and down the field on Saturday, you wouldn't feel quite as comfortable because we just haven't, again, seen it from this offense yet. To go, especially go on the road and play like this. Can you go play a clean game on the road? They're gonna have to tackle. They're not gonna have Isaiah Chisholm out there for the first half. That's gonna be a big hit to the run defense as well. So how are they gonna be able to mostly just tackle Cooper?
Right.
That's it. Oh, Beavers are more talented than San Diego State is. They have more continuity within the program with Trent Bray. Sean Lewis is coming in from the outside to San Diego State. But, they are going to be playing at home, and Oregon State's going to be playing on the road. How does Trent Bray handle a road game? It's a late night game. The guy's going to be distracted early in the day, or going to be able to focus for a 7:30 kickoff. It's going to be hot. How are they going to deal with that? So all these things contribute to it potentially being a long day for the defense, and they're going to have to just wear it out. If they're going to want to be successful and avoid San Diego State pulling 40 minutes time of possession because they just hold on to the ball with Cooper and he just goes over and over and over.
Yeah.
And over. They're this is the dude who feels like he's the best running back in the country. In case you're curious, just go Google him. He's said some quotes this past week after his game, like the Boise State running back who the Beavers will see later on the season.
Ashton, Ashton touchdowns and
so good. Averaged 14 yards a carry. Yeah, Marquez Cooper went on. It's I saw his performance, but I'm better.
Yeah, and they're launching a Heisman campaign for Ashton up there in Boise, and he is a talent. Like I said, he is one of those kids that I have no idea. I mean, and again, some kids loyalty matters. Very few these days, but some kids it does. How some team didn't go get him is beyond me.
Well, I think they tried.
Because Boise, again, all due respect to the blue. Again, it's one of the coolest brands as far as again, I grew up when Boise was, it's just cool. It's a cool brand. That being said, I know you're NIL limited in Boise, Idaho. And with that, that's loyalty. So, and to your point, Marcus Cooper could have maybe went and played somewhere better than San Diego State for the numbers that he had obviously put up. And, it's, he's extremely talented. And I think the biggest thing is that Sean Lewis is known for having a up-tempo, explosive attack. The fact that they were down 6-3 to A&M Commerce in the first half and then won that game, I believe, ended up winning 45-14. I get halftime adjustments, but that is like putting the hammer down after halftime. I don't care who it is. I mean, for a true freshman quarterback, nonetheless, too, leading that onslaught. So I do think the Beavers have to treat San Diego State with a good amount of respect. I know that, at this point it is a 6-point favorite for Oregon State, but they can score, at least against what A&M Commerce's offense was. That being said, like TJ said, he nailed it. Tackling was not good last year. I'm going to go a step further. We have PFF metrics. Whether or not you believe it for 100% certainty, PFF metrics had them as the worst Power 5 tackling team last year. So, like TJ said, the good news with that is you replaced your front seven. So you're hoping the front seven is inherently better tacklers than the front seven that were departed. The defensive backfield, there are a couple holdovers, like TJ said. So guys like Jaden Robinson need to be able to tackle, so on, all these kind of things. Kobe Singleton as well, and they are not necessarily the biggest defensive back size-wise either. So again, the importance of wrapping up and all those things. But Ryan, same question I posed TJ over to you over for the defensive side. What stood out to you as, maybe solid or needs work against Idaho State, and how do you think that'll translate against the Aztecs this weekend?
I think TJ nailed it, stopping the run and then also getting the pass rush too. But then again, when you're going against a team like Idaho State that's going to throw it 70 times, in a game, that's just kind of like, you can take what you can get from that there and at least force the quarterback out of the pocket and make on those throws, across the body where it's like the ball's going to be put in harm's way and your guys can go make a play on it. But really, I think the biggest thing is just coverage wise. I think from the secondary, just being a little more tight in their assignments when it comes to man coverage. I know Hayward was talking about that today a little bit. There was a few times where some of those receivers for Idaho State just found little bits of separation there and were able to break off some big plays kind of here and there. And so it's just being more sound in what they're looking for. And I don't really think either too that we've seen a lot from Hayward in terms of exotics or any pressures or anything like that either. And I think this might be the weekend where you might see a little more of that and that pass rush maybe get home a couple times throughout the game. But this is a team where I think, the defense, you're kind of matching up against an offense that you've gone against in practice multiple times, very similar of what they want to do. And that's what they've been kind of saying all week. And so I really think it's a bit of coverage, pass rush, and then also just being sound in your assignments, stopping the run and stopping the pass.
For sure. And obviously, I think it goes without saying, like, it's a pretty big cliche, like, get pressure on the quarterback. But specifically in this matchup, guys, it seems pretty cut and dry. Like, if they make Danny O'Neal, the 18-year-old's, life tough, it's going to be hard for San Diego State to win this game. So, not to say that, they can't get the run game going, like obviously said with Marquez Cooper, but I think if you are able to put pressure on the young quarterback, your odds for success go up dramatically in this game. And obviously that's one of the football cliches, but what else do you guys see as kind of like the key matchups kind of in this game? I mean, I look obviously the defensive line linebackers against O'Neal. If O'Neal's comfortable, has time to throw, hey, anybody can pick apart a secondary if you've got time to throw back there, right? So I think that will be key. And like Ryan said, whether or not we see some more exotics, TJ, you mentioned it's a different, it might feel like a different kind of heat, but I was thinking it's actually going to be cooler at kickoff for San Diego State than it was at kickoff for Idaho State. So they're already well prepared for the heat, baby.
Well, it's what happens when you're on the water instead of 40 miles inland.
But no, I mean, it was underrated and nobody talked about it, but it was easily one of the hotter Oregon State openers I remembered. And maybe that was a reason for some sluggish play in the first half. I mean, I doubt it, but I mean, everything kind of factors in. And it was, I'll say this from, talking to fans, talking to all, it sounded guys like we were in a really good spot being up in the air conditioned press box compared to maybe some others at the stadium. It was a little toasty from what I heard at Reeser on Saturday down in the sunshine.
What I think a key to winning is so we're going to go on the other side of the ball is we want to see a little bit more from the offense like open up the playbook a little bit more. So like here,
Yeah.
because here's what they're doing. They get the luxury of playing the Ducks in week 3. They don't have, they would prefer to not show Dan Lanning and that team the entire playbook in 2 weeks before they play the
Right.
game. Need to keep some intrigue and some mystery because frankly, that is the biggest game of the season. So you gotta hold your cards as close as you possibly can. Fortunately, they're going to have to turn over a card or two down at San Diego State because there would be a worry that your team goes on the road and it looks like a first-time coordinator, a new starting quarterback, and a lot of newer players playing offense on the road for a first time. Not the most hostile environment, but still more hostile than playing at home.
Sure.
And it could be a late night. It could be sluggish. Again, like I was talking about, just trying to sort of getting yourself ready to play. The Beavers come out and score like 3 points in the first half. People are going to be like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And even though it is A&M Commerce, the San Diego State defense played very well against, 2 yards a carry.
Yeah, they did.
Only threw for 117 yards.
Yeah, I feel like for the context of this, like I should have done this beforehand. I have no idea like how good or bad A&M Commerce is. I should have had some context on that because like it's like to that point, TJ, you're right. But is A&M Commerce a decent FCS team, a bad FC, like somewhere in the middle, right?
They're pretty brand new to the FCS level.
Makes
so
sense. Yeah.
But
anyway, sorry, TJ, to finish your
tier, yeah.
But yeah, finishing your point, TJ.
Like, I just want to see Giovanni McCoy play good.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Who's good? Who's good in game 1? Let's see good with more volume in this one. We know they're going to lean on a running game. We know those running backs are good. We don't have to answer those questions.
Right.
That we know. The question we want to know is, can you trust this quarterback room to go out on the road and be a big factor in winning a football game? Because that could be the difference between if the Beavers want to hit their ceiling this season and possibly win 10 games, that would be it. Right?
Agreed. For sure.
The run game will travel no matter where you go. You have too much depth. You have too good of an offensive line for them to do that. But how does it, how do those other guys look? Speaking of the offensive line, I did have this observation since you see the box score, it looks great. They ran up for over 350 yards on the ground. That's great. It's really good. Did it feel like the offensive line was truly like blowing Idaho State off the ball?
So I would say no, but when you look at the snap counts, they were rotating guys all over the field. And there were like Jacob Strand played a ton, Flavio Gonzalez. Like I believe there were 8 or 9 guys that got rotations. We saw guys shift. I think, again, TJ, to what you were saying, maybe not putting everything on tape, maybe getting some other guys experience. So no, to answer your question with like my eyes, I think the guys did a good job finding holes. But I think it's just because they were kind of playing musical chairs with that group a little bit. Ryan, what do you think?
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of that. I mean, you saw Strand get in there a bit, like you said. So it's kind of they're getting those guys that game rep experience in case injuries hit that room, and basically, I think that was kind of part of it there. But I think my biggest thing I'm looking for on the road is just seeing more out of the passing game and getting Giovanni McCoy into a rhythm early because. Going back to the takeaways thing, like I really do not think, like I was kind of making that observation, I really do not think Giovanni was in a rhythm until they opened up the playbook a little bit more and finally started to like have some life a little bit from the first half to the second half. And if you can do that, I think you can put a lot of those worries to bed of is Giovanni good enough to orchestrate the passing game from under center. So that I think that's going to be the biggest thing to look for, at least on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I'll circle back. I mean, for me, it's all about the front seven, right? To TJ's point, can you stop one of the best and most experienced running backs in college football, right? Especially without Chisholm, you're going to have Aiden Sullivan or Guy Reese-Goodman most likely taking over that starting spot next to Melvin Jordan with the Chisholm first half suspension because of the targeting. And then encompassing that is not only those guys' ability to stop the run, but put pressure on Danny O'Neil. I think if you can limit the run, put pressure on Danny O'Neil, you could run game your way to a victory against San Jose State. I think it'd be tough, but I think you could. If you can get that pressure on O'Neal, and you limit the running game. A couple big ifs, but that's what I think is the key thing there. And again, we'll find out on Saturday night as Oregon State will take on San Diego State 7:30 at Snapdragon Stadium on Saturday night. Gotta be one of the cooler names for a stadium, right? Snapdragon, like not bad, right? Just head on over to the Snapdragon. I mean, it's good. I'll give them credit for
the
sorry.
Snapdragon.
I think it's maybe the Dragon, the Snapdragon. But I mean, as far as like companies go that are real life to sponsor a stadium, it's not quite Pitbull Stadium, but it's pretty close. It's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, hey, I'm just saying, hey, does Pitbull want to come sponsor Reeser? I mean, I'm just saying.
Hey, Mr. Worldwide in Corvallis, Oregon.
Man,
who says no?
I'm just saying, that being said, all jokes aside, we have a couple minutes left of the podcast. I want just quick reactions, guys. Just good move, bad move, or to be determined. Big news this week was Oregon State and Washington State decided to not renew the Mountain West partnership agreement for next year. And the long and short of that is the Beavers and Cougars were able to backfill their schedule this year in the wake of the conference falling apart by paying the Mountain West teams a pretty handsome $14 million to fill the schedule. And, it was a Band-Aid for a year. Now we know that they will not be pursuing that next year. Real quick, just between you guys, I'm curious, good sign, bad sign, or undetermined? The most likely scenario that we've heard, they're going to be able to prepare to build a quasi-independent schedule next year. They've already got 6 games scheduled. There's a chance of conference looming as well, but just real quick, I'm curious your guys' thoughts on this. We'll start with you, TJ.
I'd say it's a good sign because they wouldn't have passed on it if they didn't have solid other opportunities. Do we know exactly what those are? No, we don't. But if there was absolutely nothing left on the table for next season, they would pay the Mountain West another $14 million for 6 games. It could be a combination of saving money and getting better games.
Ryan, what do you think?
I think it's a good sign too, because it means they have a plan in place, whatever that scheduling partnership is. It could be with the ACC, Big 12, fill out the rest of that schedule for next year with some higher quality teams. But like, I think it's a good move because they would have not done this had they not had a plan that they felt surely like solid on going forward. And that's, I think, the biggest tell there. It's just more of a matter of what that partnership is going to be going forward. I think until we know the exact details on that, that's going to be TBD, but I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what athletic director Scott Barnes and President Jatai Murthy can do behind the scenes, as those two are obviously the leaders in figuring out what's the next stage for Oregon State. So we'll definitely keep tabs on that as the podcast go. We might even touch on a little bit more next week, but that'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the Edge Podcast. Big shout out to Ryan Harlan and TJ Mathewson. Appreciate you guys joining me. Beavers Edge will be delivering you guys road game coverage this week. Make sure to stay locked to Beavers Edge. We'll be previewing the matchup against San Diego State. Thanks for watching this edition of the Edge Podcast.